In the top stories, Prime Minister Harris officially opens SKN Embassy in Dubai. Case dismissed against St. Lucian activist. And Canada floods cut rail link to Vancouver port. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Wednesday, the 17th of November 2021. I'm Jason Davis. Nationally, Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris officially opened the Federation's embassy in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates during a brief ceremony on Wednesday. The opening of the Federation's embassy in Abu Dhabi, which was previously delayed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, is expected to help in the strengthening of the relationship between the governments and peoples of St. Kitts and Nevis and the United Arab Emirates. Prime Minister Harris used the opportunity while in Dubai at the courtesy of the UAE government to open the embassy. Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the UAE, His Excellency Khalifa Shaheen Al Amarar, represented the government of the UAE at Wednesday's opening ceremony. Also in attendance were the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, St. Kitts and Nevis' ambassador to the UAE, His Excellency Justin Hawley, resident ambassador of the Commonwealth of Dominica to the UAE, His Excellency Hubert Charles, St. Kitts and Nevis Commissioner General at Expo 2020, Elsa Wilkin Ambrister, senior government officials, invited guests and staff of the St. Kitts and Nevis Embassy. Meanwhile, back in St. Kitts and Nevis, the police have charged a man from St. Kitts on 2 counts of incest. According to a press release, the acts were committed in May and June of this year. He was charged on November 11 for the offences and has been remanded to Her Majesty's prison. In other news, residents of Cayon and Keys are encouraged to make use of 2 little library stations that were officially commissioned in St. Kitts on Tuesday following a brief ceremony. The little library concept has been described as innovative. Adult and children's books are placed inside the small wooden stations that are strategically erected throughout the community, and anyone can access the little library to borrow books with the condition that those that are stamped are returned within 3 weeks. Those that are not stamped are available for free if the reader so desires. The initiative is a collaboration between the Ruth Library Foundation Incorporated, Good Deeds Day St. Kitts and Nevis, and Chippewa Volunteer Center, with support from the Department of Youth Empowerment and the Charles A. Halbert Public Library. Minister of Youth, the Honorable John L. Powell, participated in the commissioning ceremony held at Wade Street, Cayon. He noted the current challenges to the education system brought about by the global health crisis and said that books remain a valuable asset.
As it relates to this Little Libraries program, it's not often that we hear about books and reading books. Somewhere along the way we seem to have lost the appreciation for books with the development of the internet and social media and what have you. But there's still a tremendous need for libraries, and I commend them on the foundation on this particular effort. A book doesn't lose battery life, it doesn't need charging. A book does not depend on the availability of internet. And it doesn't depend on the availability of electricity. And so I think what COVID has shown us is that perhaps sometimes we need to go back to basics.
The minister also thanked individuals with Chippewa Volunteer Center for their efforts in erecting the little library stations under the Good Deeds Day umbrella. Good Deeds Day started in 2007 in Israel and has since become a global movement. It encourages people to help others to positively change the world.
While we might identify a day, a good deeds there to do good deeds, it should be an inspiration for us to do good deeds every day of the year. And so I commend and give full support to the Chippewa initiative.
Persons of all ages were strongly encouraged to make use of the little libraries and to volunteer wherever and whenever possible. Additional little library stations will be built across the country in the near future. The books will be maintained by the Department of Youth Empowerment and the Charles A. Halbert Public Library. We now move to news on the regional scene. St. Lucian Christopher Hunt, who faced the courts for allegedly staging an unlawful protest in 2020, had the case discontinued after against him after a magistrate dismissed the case. Hunt says he will return to court, but as the plaintiff. NBC Prime reports.
Was Christopher Hunt on that day and before yesterday a political prisoner or a victim of political victimization?
I think for sure I was a victim of political victimization.
After 16 months of adjournments and delays, the case against Christopher Hunt, accused of being the ringleader of an unauthorized protest last July, was thrown out of the magistrate's court at trial on November 11th. A mere 24 hours following the magistrate's ruling, Hunt told reporters he expects to be back in court, but not as a defendant. He intends to file a civil suit against the Royal St. Lucia Police Force and by extension the state for his wrongful arrest, which he hopes will discourage authority figures from attempting to subvert the constitutional rights of citizens.
This is not about me, even though they wanted to make it about me. But the reason that even now I know that I'm only halfway and I have to pursue a civil suit is because I have to make sure this cannot happen to anybody ever again. If this happens 20 years from now, people say, well, boy, if only Hunt had, or if only we had, the people had. I don't have money for a lawyer to go and chase down a civil suit, but I'll find it, because right now I don't want anybody, man, woman, child, any St. Lucian, to ever be able to be arrested in that type of fashion and have that done. To think that it had to be negotiated to let me out before 5 days.
Hunt's incendiary rhetoric and envelope-pushing antics on his Revolution talk show attracted scrutiny and confrontation, mostly from supporters of the former Chasney-led United Workers' Party administration, whose policies he regularly criticized, together with the government ministers implementing them. It all seemed to come to a head last July when St. Lucia was under a state of emergency and managing the COVID-19 pandemic. Hundreds who converged on Jeremy Street in the capital for a planned round-the-island protest were asked to disperse after police determined the organizers did not have approval to proceed. Hunt, who used his show to promote the event, was on the ground that day and was also asked by police to instruct the crowd to clear out. He complied. However, several motor vehicle convoys led a procession along the island's highways and byways. Hunt was riding in his own vehicle when police tracked him down and detained him. He was charged for breaching the Public Order Act.
This was an enforcement of law. I went through the process. I submitted to the process. I didn't resist arrest. I didn't resist anything. I asked questions. I got no answers. I still had my freedom taken from me. And now I'm going to make sure that I'm going to see it through, that whoever did this, right, is going to have to now come and sit down in the court on their behalf when I flip the script.
Shallery and the officers in charge on the day came under scrutiny after a leaked copy of the Dennery Police Station diary emerged, instructing police officers to order citizens wearing red to turn back. The police force has not publicly commented on the latest ruling. Rihani Isidore, NBC Prime.
Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown says the country will miss some economic targets, but is hopeful that the country will revamp in 2022. ABS News reports.
We will have to spend more in order to stimulate the economy.
Prime Minister Honorable Gaston Brown, speaking on Caribbean Entertainment's Everyday Network, says the country is likely to miss several of its economic targets as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We could even find ourselves maybe with a primary deficit, but I believe from 2022 we should see some improvement. And in terms of an overall deficit, more than likely we'll be incurring deficits.
At present, he estimates the country's debt to gross domestic product or GDP ratio is 90%.
We may well have to exceed 90% and to go over 100% in order to achieve that growth objective, but ultimately we will be able to restore those ratios to bring them down over a period of time, and hopefully by about 2030 we'll be back down to maybe 60-something% of GDP.
He provides insight into ways the government intends to increase its revenues. Reviewing concessions granted to investors is one of them.
But we do accept that there was room in terms of reducing some of those concessions, especially for ongoing projects. Well, the new one we recognize you have to continue to incentivize, but having gotten those concessions, we saw a need to tweak them and to reduce the extent of the concessions.
Rakib Aparicio reporting for.
Internationally, former Boston City Councilor Michelle Wu was sworn in as the first woman and person of color to be elected mayor of Boston. More in this report.
Canada's largest port, Vancouver, was cut off on Tuesday by major flooding and landslides, which have killed at least one person and left 2 more missing across British Columbia. Some areas in the province received over a month's worth of rainfall days before. At least one person died when
I, Michelle Wu.
I, Michelle Wu.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support.
That I will support.
The Constitution.
The Constitution.
Of the United States.
Of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Madam Mayor, congratulations.
When we make City Hall more accessible, we are all raised up. When we communicate in many languages, we all understand more. And most of all, when we connect the power of city government to the force of our neighborhoods and communities, we see how much is possible for our city. We need everyone to join us in the work of doing the big and the small, getting City Hall out of City Hall into our neighborhoods, and embracing the possibility of this city. The reason to make a Boston for everyone is because we need everyone for Boston right now. We have so much work to do, and it will take all of us to get it done. So let's get to work.
And now for the weather. Present weather is partly cloudy with showers in the vicinity and slight dust haze. The winds are east-northeast at 10 to 18 miles per hour with higher spells over coastal waters and elevated terrain. Gusts up to 28 miles per hour are possible in some showers. The temperature is 30 degrees Celsius or 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Seas are moderate with waves of 5 to 6 feet. The weather forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis says today will be partly cloudy to sometimes cloudy with a 60% or moderate chance of brief showers. Tonight will also be partly cloudy to sometimes cloudy with a 60% of moderate chance of brief showers. Sunset today will be at 5:35 p.m. Sunrise tomorrow at 6:17 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jason Davis.